Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda and I'm here with my weekly update. I think my husband's done cooking in the kitchen. We'll see. A lot of you this past week, of course, has been crap. Well, last week and a half. And I'm really thankful for all the comments and supportive comments and everything that I've gotten, as the book people are the best people. Yes, I'm still raging. I am still in the phase where I'm listening to Les Miserables on repeat. For anyone who's interested, I'm listening to the 2020, the cast album of the 2020 stage concert, because I think that has overall the strongest cast. Actually has a really good cast with one exception. Has Alfie Boe, who's the most amazing Valjean. Carrie Hope Fletcher, I think's her name, is Fontaine. She's amazing. The bald guy who used to be on the Great British Baking Show is Thénardier. The weak spot is, and this is kind of surprising, is Michael Ball as Javert. So if you don't know who Michael Ball is, but if you're not a theater kid, you probably wouldn't know who he is, or if you're not British, because apparently he's big in Britain. He's a musical theater actor, and he originated the role of Marius way back 40, it hurts me to say this, 40 years ago when this musical premiered. I was like, holy crap, this musical's 40 years old. I've been obsessed with this for 40 years. And he's been, on, I can think of 3 different recordings that he plays Marius on. So it is kind of fun to hear him play a different role in Les Miserables. Problem is, he doesn't have the voice for Javert. I mean, that's a baritone role and he's a tenor. And I don't know if he realizes this and is overcompensating, or if he just is making some bad performance choices, but he's overacting the part and then it's working against the music. And I'm sorry, I'm musical theater weirding out here on this, but that's my issue with this. But overall, that's like one weak spot in this entire one. And of all the cast recordings I've listened to, this is the one that only has one weak spot. So that's the one I'm listening to. In my mid-month book bash, I started giving like survival toolkit tips. I gave at least 2. I have 3 because I realized after I put that video up, there were some vlog clips that didn't get in. And then some of you gave me some new ones, so let me go over them. First one, get flu shot, your COVID booster, your tetanus, shingles, whatever it is you need to get vaccines, get them, because there's no guarantee you're going to be able to get them again. Okay? We've seen now RFK, he wants RFK to lead Health and Human Services, which would be a disaster. The good part of this, and I was telling Sue at Sue Jackson this, that I read just this morning, was apparently Big Pharma really hates that idea, and Big Pharma gives a lot of money to Republican senators. So there's hope for the one time ever, big money in politics might actually work in our favor, but there's that. So there's that. Get your finances in order, pay off any debt you can, boost your savings if you can, all that. Things are financially, we're going to go for a wild time. It's going to be wild. So get your finances in order. Now, this is one I think I didn't make the video. But it goes in with that one. If you have investments, try and, if you can, migrate things to low risk accounts. Try to buffer. It's going to be volatile. So lower risk accounts are going to be, especially if you're going to need that money in the near future. For example, we have our kids' college saving funds, and we're going to have to be looking at that. And then two other things I didn't think about that came to me in the comments. Sue said, if you have to make any purchases where you're going to get tax credits, so like energy saving appliances or anything like that, do it by the end of the year, because probably not going to get them again. This is your chance. And then, Michael Clark, and this one I'm almost embarrassed about because, I'll get to it. It's get your passport. I have been meaning to get my passport since 2016. So my passport expired and it's in my maiden name. So I had to get a new one. The kids have never had one. My husband's is expired. So in 2016, I'm like, I'm going to need my passport unless I have to flee the country. And then the bureaucracy under 45 got so horribly bleh and foobar, that it was taking forever. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to wait until things get calmed down. So then things did get calmed down when we had Biden come in, and I just didn't get it. And now I have everything ready to go. except my husband's birth certificate. He needs to get that so I can get our passports, because I want to get that paperwork in before the end of the year. So I'm going to bug him later to do that. It's like, that is the one thing I'm waiting for. So yeah, so those are more toolkit options for you. Let's see what else. So a lot of people, and I've been seeing this a lot on different booktube channels, people saying that, this has all been really affecting their reading, and I get it. They've been having trouble focusing and all that. That's all completely understandable. For myself, and I will get to this a little bit when I get to what I've read, it is definitely affecting what I'm reading. However, I am reading a lot because I am running away from reality. It's like, there you go. Why are you reading so much? Because I don't want to deal with reality. And yeah, so that's a silver lining, I guess. But I do have 6 books to talk about here. And for those of you like, wow, you read 6 books this week? Not really. I am a book polygamist. I have a lot of books going at once. So some of these I've been reading for a very long time, and I just happened to finish them this week. So it's just luck of the draw that 6 books ended up this week. So let me go through them. And the first one is one I was reading for months. It was a pick up, put down kind of book. And that is, and I talked about this in my mid-month book bash, so you've seen it there. Maeve's Times, in Her Own Words by Maeve Binchy. This is a collection of writing that she did for the Irish Times, starting in the 1960s, going all the way through to the 2000s into the 2000s. The last one in here was her article about William and Catherine's royal wedding. So that's how far we went. I can't remember exactly when she died. I want to say it was like 2014, but I could be wrong on that. So it goes up pretty much close to the end of her life. She was very much I guess she was like a lifestyle writer, because a lot of her articles they're kind of, I don't want to say fluffy, because that sounds bad, but they're kind of like slice of life writing, and it's delightful. It's just, there you go. And there's nothing more than like 2 or 3 pages. As I said, you can pick it up, put it down. That's what I did. I did enjoy the fact that she kind of covers the royal family through this, because she does say in that last essay that she had actually been invited to 3 royal weddings. She was always in the press box. And then she goes, but all 3 of those weddings ended in divorce. So she says, like, it's probably a good thing she's not at William and Catherine's. But, she writes about the excitement of Charles and Diana, like this beautiful, like, what a fairy tale. And then she mentions, like, but we're a little worried about Charles's girlfriends. And she names off a bunch of them, none of whom are named Camilla. And then, there's trouble in paradise. And then she talks a little about Fergie. And then we get to the divorce. She talks about that. And then Camilla and Charles getting married, and so you kind of get like the whole thing, and you can kind of see like her mindset changing with that. And I bring it up only because that's sort of that's a topic that kind of carries through a lot of this. So and also being Irish, she has a different view of the royal family it's more nuanced than Americans have. It's definitely different than what people in the United Kingdom have. So there you go. And then Jennifer loves books. We were talking comfort reads were Maeve Binchy and Agatha Christie. So I finished Toward Zero. This I read one Agatha Christie book a month in roughly publication order. And this was definitely a roughly in publication order month, because I was actually supposed to read this in December and didn't realize that until after I'd finished it. So I think The Moving Finger is the one I was supposed to read this month. I'll read it next month, but this one. This is what I needed. I needed silly British people on an estate and someone dying to make me feel better. And I don't know what that says about me, but I got it here. This felt very much like a British crime show. It's a superintendent battle book who's not usually my favorite, but he's actually pretty good here, and he evokes Poirot. Battle and Poirot are in the same universe. So that was interesting. I talk about this more in Mid-Month Book Bash. Not a perfect book. I don't think she played fair all the time in it. There's that. And there's also this weird development at the end. I'm like, what? Why would you do something like that? It's totally unnecessary. Not even necessary to the plot, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's at the very end. So But it was fun. This is probably in my top 5 of Agatha Christie books. And I don't know if that's because it really is quality-wise worth being in my top 5, or it just hit me at the right time and the experience, what it gave me, put it in the top 5. But there you go. Okay, so now we're going to get to a book where the election became a problem. And I think I mentioned this in my last weekly wrap-up, and that is this book, The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. So I read this both for Nonfiction November. It's my shot book, so it's up to the first shots of the Civil War against Fort Sumter, which is in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. I also am reading it for Historathon 2024. Now, I have read Erik Larson before. I read The Devil in the White City, and I read he wrote like this novella thing that was audio only, which was fine. It was fine. I prefer his nonfiction. He's a very reliable author. He does a very good job. Objectively, this is a good book. Objectively, this is a good book. It was a terrible time for me to be reading it. So Election Day happened like right in the middle of this book for me. And so the first half of the book, it's kind of like, oh, this is interesting history. And I'm very kind of like looking at it in sort of a historical sort of viewpoint. And as I've said, I have a background in history. I went to school in Virginia, so I have a little bit of Southern in there too. But I'm also like zero sympathy for the South. It's kind of like zero sympathy. And then we had Election Day, and this became a little harder to read because it's like, oh God, this is what we're up for. Yes. And the whole thing with how emboldened the chivalry, that's kind of like the upper Southern class, they called themselves the chivalry, which right there should tell you a lot what they thought of themselves. But how they were emboldened during this time really reflects how a certain subset of our population feels very emboldened now. So it was really a hard book to read. And if I were not reading it, if I were not halfway through it, reading it for Historathon and reading it for Nonfiction November, I probably would have paused it. But at that point, I said, I'm just going to push through and finish it. I will probably reread this book at some point in the future, probably not in the next 4 years, but because it is objectively a good book. It just was not a good time for me to be reading it. Now, stay tuned for next week because I will have the antidote to this book. I will be done with it in time for my next wrap up, the antidote to this book. So stay tuned. Okay, and then this is another one I had been reading for a while. This is a short story collection called Mystery Lights by Lena Valencia. So I picked this book up. I ordered it when I was going through a Tin House catalog because this is a Tin House book. And I was kind of attracted to it. It's kind of set, a lot of the stories, not all of the stories, a lot of the stories are set in the American Southwest, which is a place I spend a fair amount of time in because my father lives down there. And I'm like, oh, well, that sounds kind of fun. So I picked it up. And this was really a good book. It delighted my dark soul. Let's put it that way. I would say this is horror, but it's what I would call Twilight Zone horror for the most part. Some of it isn't even really horror. Some of it's just sort of like, that's kind of a little psychological, but I liked that we get like a variety of things in here. I mean, we do have completely psychological stuff, and we also have cave people. So, or cave monsters, I guess. Yeah. So it is different. She really plays with different kinds of horror in this. Now, I actually looked up when I went to enter this into my spreadsheet. This does not have great reviews on either Storygraph or Goodreads, and I don't know why. I actually thought this was a really strong collection. Again, dark and twisty inside, so that might be part of it. But I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to people. This is a debut. I would definitely read more from this author coming up. Okay, now I have a book that I did read completely this week, and that is Son of a Trickster by Eden Robinson, and this was a buddy read with Sarah at Roadworthy. I had never heard of this book before she suggested it, and I'm like, oh, sure, go ahead. I was a little apprehensive, first of all, because it was YA, and I've said this recently in the past, YA books tend to put me in mom mode, and I don't necessarily like to read books in mom mode, but this book really didn't feel YA. The profanity is through the roof, which doesn't bother me. I mean, if you hear the way my husband talks, I'm used to it. But it was shocking for a YA book. There's a lot of drug use, same thing, and there is some pretty detailed sexual activity in it. So I'm like, this is a really, on that one, like very strange that it's YA. And then Katie Sykes, commenter, said that in Canada, this is not marketed as YA. That's the Americans say it's YA. In the United States, it's YA. In Canada, they know better. It's not YA. Anyway, probably the reason they thought it was YA is because the main character is a 16-year-old boy. So in this book, we meet Jared, and Jared is native. We first meet him when he's 5 years old, and at this point, it seems like he has a pretty good family. It's his parents and him. His maternal grandmother doesn't like him, which is weird, but his paternal grandmother just loves him. She's the fun grandma, and they're moving. I don't know how far they're actually moving cross country or anything like that, but they're moving to another part of British Columbia, northern British Columbia, for a job, the father's job. So that's all great. And then boom, he's 16 years old. His family is no longer together. He lives with his, like the mother doesn't want him to have anything to do with the father. And yeah. And the mother is like living with this wacko boyfriend, and drugs and everything are up the wazoo. And they are, it's just a lot of profanity, which again, didn't bother me, except I went into this thinking it was a YA novel. And basically, part of this that I found really heartbreaking is that Jared, as a 16-year-old boy, is quite literally the only adult in the room. Like, the only adult. And it broke my heart that he is having to take care of everybody else. And that was, that was really hard, but that was part of the book. There's a lot of humor in this book. And then sort of these kind of weird things happen, and you don't know, are they supernatural or is he stoned? I don't know. And it kind of goes from there. I kind of like that stuff. I'm going to be honest. I kind of like that stuff. Sarah said she felt like it was a little bit of a bait and switch, which I can understand that. I kind of felt from the synopsis I read of this book before I read it, I was primed for that. So maybe that's not why that's why I didn't feel like it was a bait and switch. It is the first in a trilogy, and I have heard the trilogy is really, really good. Again, Katie said that the third is her favorite, and I definitely am going to be reading on in the trilogy, but not right now. To avoid spoilers, I will be vague. There's a character you meet in this book that's bad news, and he's a minor character in this book. He becomes a major character in the second book, and my mindset is not where I can handle that right now. So I'm definitely going to wait a bit before I read more of it. But I did enjoy it. There were some things about it. Again, I'm going to be vague because I don't want to have spoilers, but there were some things I'm like, what? Really? Huh? But again, also the first book in a trilogy, so those things may play out. Definitely a lot of what is called magical realism. I don't know if it's really magical realism or indigenous mythology. That was one thing about this book, is I kind of felt like, and I had this experience reading Mexican Gothic. Like, I always felt like I was just missing something. And a bookish best friend was telling me later, she had talked to people, and there's a lot of like Mexican mythology that I didn't know about that went into Mexican Gothic. And I kind of feel like there's indigenous mythology involved here that I just don't know about, which is fine. She's under no obligation to explain this to me, but just that was sort of my take on that. So, but I am definitely interested in reading more in it. And if you're okay with a ton of profanity and lots of drug and alcohol use and violence, but also a lot of humor, you might like this book. And then finally, I've talked about this book before, but I finished it last night. And that is Gmorning, Gnight, Little Pep Talks for Me and You by Lin-Manuel Miranda, illustrated by Johnny Sun. So this book came out in 2018. So like in 2017, Lin-Manuel Miranda was on that app, the Bird app. And every day, twice a day, he'd write a little pep talk, one in the morning, one at the night, because 2017 was kind of a bad time in this country, right? And a lot of people needed pep talks. And then this is a collection of those. And I had this sitting on my shelf since I got the book in 2018. And I pulled it out this summer, just kind of, I'm just going to read this during election season. It's kind of keep me going during election season. And I really liked it. You could read this entire book in less than half an hour. You could. I would read one in the morning and then one before I go to bed. So it took me longer than 30 minutes. Quite obviously took me a couple months. And I had great plans of passing this book on when I finished it to a friend of mine who I think probably could use it. But then November 5th happened. And now I'm like, okay, I'm back. I'm starting this book over again. And I will probably just keep this book going over and over and over again because we're going to need it. Oh my God, we're going to need it. So yeah, that's my weekly wrap up. Again, thank you all for your support. Yeah, so that's life. I think we're all kind of bracing. I would say kind of maybe consider some of my toolkit ideas, survival toolkit ideas. And yeah, so tell me what you're reading this week. If you're reading, if your reading is, tell me if you're having trouble reading. I totally get that too. And I'm going to go run away from reality for a bit. So, like, subscribe, join my Discord, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.